Ladies and gentlemen, let's get real for a moment. Every single day, someone cuts us off in traffic, speaks to us with disrespect, disagrees with us, ignores us, or just flat out tries to dim our light. And every single time we let that get under our skin, we lose. We give away our power. But what if I told you that it's entirely possible to live in this chaotic, loud, opinionated world and never get angry or bothered by anyone? Not because you don't care, not because you're weak, but because you're focused, because you're in control. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a mountain get shaken by the wind? Of course not, and neither should you. The first step in mastering your emotional world is understanding a fundamental truth. You are the gatekeeper of your reaction. No matter what anyone says or does, the way you feel, think, and act in response is entirely up to you. This isn't just a motivational phrase, it's a psychological fact rooted in self-awareness and personal responsibility. The moment you internalize this idea, your life begins to change in subtle but powerful ways. Think about the last time someone made you angry. Maybe it was a rude comment, a dismissive tone, or someone cutting you off mid-sentence. In that moment, you felt something heat rising, fists clenching, heart pounding. But here's what most people miss. That emotional spike wasn't caused by the person's action itself. It was caused by your interpretation of the action. The real trigger wasn't the external behavior, it was the internal meaning you attached to it. This is why two people can hear the same insult and respond completely differently. One might laugh it off, another might erupt in rage. The words were the same, the situation was the same, but the reaction was shaped by individual control, by mindset, by how much personal power the person chose to keep or give away. Most people go through life in a reactive state. Someone pushes their buttons, and they fire off like a machine with no control panel. But the truth is, you do have a control panel. And once you recognize it, you can use it to reprogram your default responses. This doesn't mean you never feel emotions. It means you stop letting other people dictate your emotions. You reclaim your right to choose. That control begins with awareness. Start paying attention to your internal dialogue the next time you feel upset or slighted. What are you telling yourself in that moment? Are you saying, they shouldn't treat me this way, or this always happens to me, or I'm tired of people disrespecting me? Those thoughts are choices, not truths. And if you change the narrative, you change the emotion. Letting go of the illusion that others have power over your mood is one of the most liberating decisions you can make. It doesn't mean excusing bad behavior or tolerating toxic people. It means recognizing that your peace is not a bargaining chip. You don't trade it for someone's approval. You don't risk it to win an argument. You don't give it away just because someone else is having a bad day. This level of self-command doesn't happen overnight. It requires repetition, patience, and the willingness to pause before reacting. But once you practice it enough, it becomes your default setting. You stop giving emotional control to strangers, critics, and circumstances. You become less disturbed, less rattled, and more centered, no matter what's happening around you. Knowing who you are truly and unapologetically is one of the most powerful defenses against anger, insecurity, and emotional disturbance. When your identity is self-defined, it acts like a compass, constantly guiding your thoughts, actions, and reactions back to your core. Most people let the world define them. They adopt labels handed to them by family, society, culture, or past failures. But when you allow others to tell you who you are, you also give them the ability to tell you who you're not. And that's where inner chaos begins. When you don't have a firm grasp on your own identity, you become vulnerable to every opinion, judgment, and offhand comment. A single word of criticism can feel like a personal attack. A disagreement becomes a threat. Why? Because without a strong foundation, every external challenge feels like a destabilizing force. You start reacting to protect a version of yourself that isn't even yours. It's a patchwork of other people's expectations, their projections, their fears. This is where defensiveness is born. This is where the impulse to argue, prove, or retaliate gains momentum. But when you define yourself, when you take the time to get deeply honest about your values, your goals, your strengths, and yes, even your weaknesses, you become rooted. You don't need validation to feel real. You don't seek permission to exist in your truth. The noise around you begins to fade, not because it stops, but because it simply doesn't carry weight anymore. Someone might call you arrogant, and you know you're just confident. Someone might call you cold, and you know you're simply focused. When your self-image is clear and intentional, you stop reacting to misinterpretations. You begin to operate from truth, not fear. This kind of clarity takes work. It means asking yourself tough questions. Who am I? What matters most to me? What do I want to contribute to the world? What kind of energy do I want to carry into each room I enter? You'll have to let go of roles you were conditioned to play and beliefs that never truly belong to you. It requires unlearning as much as learning. But once you define yourself with conviction, no one else gets to write your script. Having a self-defined identity also means you're not shaken when someone sees you differently than you see yourself. That difference doesn't have to be corrected. It doesn't have to become a debate. You understand that other people's perceptions are filtered through their own experience, and that has nothing to do with you. You don't take it personally because you're no longer living to fit into their frame. You're living in your own. And when you're living in your own frame, you respond instead of react. You observe without internalizing. You remain steady, not because you're trying to be stoic, but because there's nothing to prove. You already know who you are. You're not auditioning for acceptance. You're not adjusting your personality to fit someone else's comfort. You show up as you are, and that alone disarms conflict resistance. Your mind is your most valuable real estate, and the quality of your life is shaped by what you allow to take up space there. Every thought, every opinion you absorb, every complaint you entertain, these are investments. Some bring returns in the form of clarity, peace, and progress. Others drain you slowly, creating emotional clutter that weighs you down. Guarding your mind is not about shutting the world out. It's about curating what you allow in. It's about setting a standard for your attention, your focus, and your inner peace. Most people live in mental environments they would never tolerate in their physical space. Imagine inviting noisy, negative strangers into your home, letting them throw trash on the floor, shout nonsense in every room, and rearrange your furniture while you sit by helplessly. That's exactly what happens when you allow gossip, drama, pessimism, and fear to dominate your thinking. You may not realize it in the moment, but every unchecked thought either builds or erodes your emotional stability. Your mind is not a dumping ground, it's a control center. And the moment you treat it like one, everything begins to shift. People talk about boundaries in relationships, but the first boundary you need to establish is mental. Who gets to influence your thoughts? What kinds of conversations do you participate in? What media do you consume every day? Who are you listening to? What energy are you tolerating in your environment just because it's familiar? These questions matter, because mental boundaries are the first line of defense against being pulled into negativity. The clearer your standards, the quicker you recognize what doesn't belong. Energy is contagious. Spend enough time around negativity, and you'll start carrying it without noticing. The tone of your thoughts will shift. The way you speak will change. You'll become quicker to criticize, slower to hope. But the opposite is also true. Surround yourself with growth-minded, purpose-driven voices, and you'll feel your thoughts expanding. Your energy becomes more focused. You react less and create more. That's not an accident. That's the outcome of protecting your mental environment. Guarding your mind also means filtering your self-talk. The things you say to yourself when no one's listening are often more damaging than anything others could say. If your inner voice is critical, harsh, or doubtful, you have to challenge it the same way you challenge someone speaking that way to your best friend. You cannot afford to be passive with your inner narrative. Your thoughts are programming your emotions, your decisions, your habits, everything, and that programming starts with what you accept and repeat internally. Creating a disciplined mental space doesn't mean becoming rigid or disconnected. It means being selective. It means being conscious of how much noise you're letting in and how often you're giving your energy to things that don't serve you. Learning to respond instead of react is one of the most transformative shifts a person can make. It is the difference between living as a slave to your emotions and becoming the master of them. Reactions are immediate, impulsive, and usually driven by ego or fear. They're the sharp words you regret later, the slammed doors, the heated arguments that escalate too quickly. A reaction is what happens when something strikes a nerve and you let that energy run the show without pause, without thought, without clarity. Responding, on the other hand, requires space. It creates a gap between stimulus and action, a space where self-awareness can live, where logic can speak, where wisdom can intervene. That space is small at first. It feels unnatural, especially when emotions are high. But the more you practice it, the wider that space becomes. And in that space, you find your power. You find your peace. You realize that just because something provokes you doesn't mean it deserves your energy. People often confuse reacting with strength. They think being quick to respond is being assertive or standing up for themselves. But true power doesn't rush. It doesn't need to prove itself in the heat of a moment. When you respond instead of react, you operate from a place of inner authority. You speak with intention. You listen with purpose. You make choices that align with your values instead of being driven by temporary emotion. To respond rather than react, you need to become familiar with your triggers. Know what sets you off, what pushes your buttons, what situations bring out the worst in you. Not so you can avoid them, but so you can prepare for them. When you recognize a trigger in real time, you create an opportunity to pause. That pause is everything. In that moment, you can breathe. You can check in with yourself. You can ask, what's really going on here? Often, it's not even about the other persona. It's about your own past, your own fears, your own unmet expectations. Awareness of that internal dialogue can diffuse the emotional charge before it explodes. Responding is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's a conscious decision to act in a way that serves your highest good. It's emotional discipline. It's choosing peace over pride, clarity over chaos. You're not ignoring the issue. You're just choosing to deal with it from a place of strength rather than reactivity. That doesn't mean you never get angry. It means you don't let anger speak for you. It means you feel it, understand it, and then decide how to use it. In a world that rewards quick comebacks and emotional outbursts, choosing to respond with calm, measured intention is a radical act. It sets you apart. It protects your energy. It allows you to stay centered even when everything around you feels out of control. And most importantly, it gives you control over yourself, which is the only control that ever really matters. When you're truly focused on your mission, everything else begins to fall into perspective. The noise, the criticism, the distractions, they all start to fade when you're deeply connected to what you're here to do. A clear sense of purpose acts like blinders on a racehorse. It keeps your eyes forward and your energy concentrated. Most people get bothered by others because they're not anchored in something bigger than themselves. They drift through the day without a target. So every little disruption becomes a reason to react, to argue, to defend. But when you have a mission, a vision that actually matters to you, you don't have time to entertain everything that crosses your path. A strong mission gives your energy direction. It becomes easier to ignore petty drama because you simply have better things to do. You're building something, whether it's a business, a legacy, a stronger version of yourself, and that takes attention. It requires your full presence. You can't be pulled into every disagreement or emotional swirl if you're committed to forward movement. Time becomes precious. So does your emotional bandwidth. You start evaluating everything through a single filter. Does this help me move closer to my goal? If the answer is no, it becomes easier to let it go. People often wonder how certain individuals remain calm under pressure or seem unaffected by insults, rejection, or adversity. It's not because they're cold or disconnected. It's because they're focused. Focused people don't chase distractions. They protect their momentum. They understand that emotional reactivity is a tax on progress. Every time you get pulled into someone else's drama, you're paying for it with your attention and your peace, and when your mission truly matters, that price becomes too high. A mission also gives your life emotional structure. When you wake up with intention, when you know why you're doing what you're doing, your identity strengthens. You stop needing external validation because you're internally aligned. That alignment is powerful. It makes you resilient. When someone doubts you, you don't internalize it. You already know what you're capable of. When someone tries to provoke you, you don't bite. You've got work to do. Your clarity becomes your shield. It also becomes easier to forgive, to move on, to disengage from conflict when necessary. You stop needing to win every argument. You stop wasting time trying to change every critic's mind. You don't need to. Your results, your consistency, your character, they speak for you. You realize that every minute spent defending yourself is a minute stolen from what actually matters. So you protect your focus like a sacred resource. Staying mission-focused also shifts how you see other people's behavior. Instead of taking things personally, you see them as distractions or background noise. Not everything requires your emotional investment. Not every comment deserves a comeback. Not every situation is worth your presence. The more dialed in you are to your mission, the more effortlessly you rise above. Real strength doesn't come from dominance or volume. It doesn't come from how quick you are to clap back or how many people you can out-argue. Real strength is calm. It's quiet. It's measured. It shows up in stillness, in the ability to hold your center while everything around you tries to pull you off balance. The calm person isn't weak, they're in control. They're not uninterested, they're just unwilling to waste energy on chaos. That kind of strength is rare, and it's powerful because it's rooted in restraint, not reaction. In many environments, we're conditioned to believe that strength means being loud, forceful, and quick to assert ourselves. But that's often just a mask for insecurity. It's noise covering up a lack of inner certainty. The person who truly knows their value doesn't feel the need to constantly prove it. They're not moved by every opinion or challenge because they've already decided who they are. They're grounded. And when you're grounded, you don't flinch at every gust of wind. Calmness under pressure is not something that happens by accident. It's the result of internal discipline and emotional maturity. It comes from repeatedly choosing not to react, choosing to listen first, to understand the full picture, and to move from intention instead of impulse. When you're calm, you're dangerous not in the reckless, aggressive sense, but in the way that you become unshakable. People can't manipulate you when you're calm. They can't provoke you, bait you, or use your emotions against you. That steadiness makes you untouchable. Staying calm doesn't mean you lack passion. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you don't let your emotions run the show. You've learned how to channel your energy into things that matter. You've stopped wasting it on proving a point or making sure everyone knows you're right. Calm people have nothing to prove. They operate from a place of certainty, not ego. Their presence alone carries weight not because they demand it, but because their energy commands it. There's a quiet kind of leadership that comes with being calm. People notice it, they're drawn to it, even if they don't fully understand why. It makes others feel safe, stable, and more present themselves. Your calm becomes contagious. And in environments where tension is high or emotions are flaring, the calmest person often ends up being the most influential, not by force, but by example. The ability to stay calm also creates better decision-making. When you're not caught up in reactive energy, you can see clearly. You can assess the situation, weigh your options, and act with precision. You're not driven by panic or fear, you're rooted in purpose. That kind of emotional intelligence gives you an edge in relationships, in business, in leadership, and in life. Calmness is not something you perform, it's something you embody. It's the result of doing the inner work, of building self-trust, of knowing that no matter what's happening around you, you'll handle it. That confidence, that stillness, that poise, it's what sets you apart.